All right, folks. Well, we're back at it, and we're going to move into chapter 5. We're going to skip chapter 4, and go into chapter 5, which is ancient Greece. And what we're going to find from ancient Greece are some main time periods. There's the geometric period, there's the Orientalizing period, the Archaic period, the Classical period, which will be broken down into different time epochs, and then also the Hellenistic period. And at the beginning and the onset of ancient Greek art during the geometric and also the Orientalizing period, we're going to see influences coming from different standards and those canons in from ancient Mesopotamia as well as ancient Egypt. And we'll see what are known as the patterns and symmetry that was found in ancient Mesopotamia, as well as the transcription of writing and patterns upon the sculptures. And those are going to be the main standards we're going to see come from ancient Mesopotamia. And then we're going to see the Egyptian canons present in the Greek sculptures as well, especially in the Archaic period. So we're going to see the influence of both ancient Mesopotamia as well as Egypt play into the beginnings of the artwork of the ancient Greeks. And if you look at map 5.1, you can see the Greek peninsula and its placement next to Asia Minor. Now, Asia Minor in that map is the northwestern part of Turkey, which is part of ancient Mesopotamia. So you can see that close relationship there already. And then you can see in the Aegean Sea a whole bunch of little islands, and that southernmost island, which is the biggest, is Crete. Crete was a trading post area with Egypt. So if you landed on Crete and then you made your way down south through the Mediterranean Sea, you would hit the northern part of Africa, which is Egypt. And that's where the trading route started with Egypt. And through this great maritime trading element and these nautical explorations that the Greeks were part of, they learned from the Mesopotamians and they learned from the Egyptians through this mercantile exchange, through this trading exchange. And that's how those influences of techniques make their way into the Greek peninsula. So that's the geography and how it all works. All right, and we'll see a lot of the influences of Mesopotamia and Egypt first placed in these islands, and then those islands will make their way into the main peninsula where Athens is whenever it comes to the actual Egyptian mainland, or I'm sorry, the Greek mainland. All right, so let's begin with the geometric period. Right? The geometric period is going to last from about 900 to 700 BCE. 900 to 700 BCE. And I want you to look at figure 512. And you can see this geometric crater, and what they're doing is they're using those very simplistic forms, very geometric patterns. You can also see the registers are also present, which is something that the Mesopotamians used, or they were breaking down the narrative and the different time relapses based off of the horizontal bands or registers. And you can see at the very top of the crater there is a system of patterns. There's also more geometric patterns that are interlaced throughout the whole entire crater, the whole entire piece. The figures are rectilinear, are triangular in the upper body and more cylinder or voluminous in the lower body, which is something that we saw present in the ancient Mesopotamians, and also a little bit of that was present in the Egyptians. You can see the use of the profile and a little bit of that composite perspective where it's twisted, where the upper body is more frontal and the lower body is more profile, and the head itself is in profile. That's present also in both registers. There's also the element of compositing the different figurative aspects in the crater. For example, you have the horses that are there in the middle of the center register, where you can calculate the amount of legs in the front, in the back, and as well as the amount of heads. There are 3 heads, 6 legs in front, 6 legs in back, which means we have 3 horses. But the body is composited into one. one unity. And that's one element that the Mesopotamians would use. There were different cuneiform scripts where they would build up the warriors and the army officers that would be built on top of each other to show the number of warriors that were present, but not calculating in the ability to perceive depth, meaning being able to show from the foreground or the very front all the way to the back how many actual people were present. So instead, they would create this like abacus tally system where they would have a certain amount of heads, certain amount of feet, and then more hands and more spears, which would indicate that there were more than what there were with the heads and the feet. So it was a way to try to show multiplication and sheer numbers without drawing or carving in how many people actually were there. And the geometric Greeks are doing the same thing on this crater. In the center register, where you see that really strange shape, which is a shield, and you look at the head that's popping up over that shield, which almost looks like the Rebel Alliance sign to Star Wars, if anybody has seen that. And there's a little head that pops up with a little dot in the middle. That's a head with the eyeball. And if you look surrounding those figures with those very strange, almost palm frond like shield shapes, there's a whole bunch of little circles with a dot in the middle, and that indicates a certain number of military or a certain number of warriors that are holding that type of shield. So those little dots, or those little circles with dots, are supposed to be a symbolic mathematical representation of that head with the dot in the middle, which is the eyeball in the middle of the head. So instead of showing, hundreds of people on this register, they're showing a circle with a dot, which indicates maybe like 50 or 100 warriors. And they're showing one bigger warrior with a shield to let us know that these little tallies reflect that warrior. So that's something in the geometric period that they're taking from the ancient Mesopotamians. And then also what they're taking from ancient Mesopotamia is in figure 5.3, and that's bronze casting. Bronze casting really wasn't something the Egyptians did. It was very heavily done in the Mesopotamian area between the Tigris and Euphrates. And you can see in figure 5.3, Hero and Centaur, that they're learning the rudimentary or the very beginning basic concepts of casting. This is a very rough and a very raw form, but it is also reflecting the stories that are involved in the Greek heritage. Here we have Hero and Centaur, which could be Hercules and Neshos. And Neshos is the centaur and Hercules is the divine male figure. And this is the exchange between the two. But the main thing is to know two things, is the bronze is being derived from studies after mercantile exchange in Asia Minor, east of Asia Minor, down into Mesopotamia, and learning these techniques of casting, bronze casting. And then also, the bodies, though hard to see in this image, are triangulated in the upper body and more voluminous in the bottom part of the body, which again is reflective of that geometric crater that we just looked at, which is something that came from Mesopotamia. And the Greeks are going to focus on that more and more, kind of a very organized upper body and a more of a voluminous lower body. And that's going to stick around for a while. Nudity is also going to come into play because there's going to be philosophies that are going to develop in ancient Greek that are going to focus on humanism, which is the idea of human control and rationale. So that's going to occur as well. So that's why you'll see with the male body, it's going to often be very nude, because that nudity is a sign of controlling emotions and senses and allowing thought, logic, and rationale to take over. Okay? So that's why you'll see that exposure of genitalia and such, because it's supposed to show that they're unaffected and unmoved by sense gratification. And it's more about control of the mind versus control of the body. And if you have control of the mind, you have control of the body. So those philosophies are going to develop. And they're also going to be transferred into the depictions of the Greek gods as well. Then I want you to look at figure 5.4 and the Manticlos Apollo. And the Manticlos Apollo is going to be your indicating slide or figure that lets us know that we're moving into the Orientalizing period. And the Orientalizing period is around 700 to 600 BCE. And the Orientalizing period is very specific to Mesopotamia. And it's very specific to Mesopotamia because Orientalizing denotes the far-reaching concepts of the East. And to the Greeks on the Greek peninsula and in the Aegean Islands, the furthest point that they're reaching to the east at this time, before Alexander the Great, is going to be ancient Mesopotamia. So anything beyond that that is further east than ancient Mesopotamia hasn't been observed or perceived yet by the Greeks. So when we're talking about Orientalizing, we're only talking about the thresholds of Eastern influence coming from Mesopotamia. Now, when Alexander the Great comes in during the Hellenistic period, that Eastern vision is going to be much further, and he's going to go all the way to India. Okay? But here with figure 5-4, with Manticlos Apollo, it's our Orientalizing staple piece. And so we see a lot of influence from Mesopotamia singularly. One is going to be the patterns of the hair, right? The kinkiness of the hair and the pattern and the symmetry of the hair. Also the wider eyes, which is something that we saw with previous statuettes in ancient Mesopotamia, with the worshiping statuettes that we saw near the Warka Temple or the White Temple in the Sumerian area. And then also there's a hole in the middle of his forehead, which is an indicator of dressing the deities, meaning that this Apollo figure is a deity, and probably real hair was placed upon his head, as well as real clothing. And this is what Apollo looks like when he's not being addressed, meaning he's not being dressed with real clothing as well as real hair. So that septum in the middle there is actually a place to tuck the hair in. It'll be locked into the middle, and also maybe a jewel, and the hair will come down over the top of the hair that's already carved into the deity. So it'll be multi-layered. And then the chest and the placement of the hand and the body is in a way where clothing will be draped upon his upper body as well as down on his lower body. All right. So that's a big element of ancient Mesopotamia, again, which is Orientalizing the Greek sculpture. Also the triangulation of the upper body and the rounded volumeness of the lower body, that mathematical use of geometric form, which is coming from the geometric Greek, which originates from Mesopotamian influences as well. So even if it's coming from the geometric, those originally were influenced by the Mesopotamians. So again, Orientalizing. The last is, if you look on the lower legs, you can see some patterns and inscriptions in Greek. And again, that's something that we saw with the Gudea sculptures in ancient Mesopotamia. All right, there was an inscribed narrative in the Mesopotamian language upon the legs and also the dress of Gudea. And that's something that they're transferring over into the lower torso of Manticlos Apollo. And the last is the casting process, the bronze casting process. So they're getting better. You can compare this to figure 5-3 and you can see how much better they are at casting in regards to that substitution process. So remember, casting is a substitution process. All right? So this figure 5-4 is going to be our move into the Orientalizing period. Okay? And then we're going to have another piece I want you to look at in regards to the Orientalizing period, and that's figure 5-6. Figure 5-6 is the Lady of Auxerre. Okay, yes, that is French because it was labeled that way by a French archaeologist, but it's originally from Crete, or the island of Crete, which is that big island in the Aegean Sea south of the Greek peninsula and north of Egypt. And north of Egypt and west of Mesopotamia. And you can see, again, that Orientalizing influence from Mesopotamia with the braided patterned hair. It's very symmetrical and laid on the side. There's also the wider eyes. And another thing is the use of the organic drapery. the organic drapery is a big deal with the Mesopotamian civilizations. The Greeks, the Egyptians used more of a rigid form of drapery and kind of incorporated in the body of the pharaoh in particular. But here, with the Lady of Auxerre, you can see that the organic drapery is coming down over her shoulders, which is an indicator of attempting that organic drapery that the Mesopotamians were so interested in doing. Also, both feet are very symmetrical down at the bottom. That's something that would be done to the Far East. There's also the pattern that we see present upon her lower body, kind of a fractal spiral, like rectilinear spiral-like pattern, which again is something coming from that orientalized interest in Mesopotamian art. The arm straight down to the side is also an indicator of something coming from that period. And then also, if you remember the statuette all the way back in the Sumerian period of the two worshippers, there is one of the hands that is up against the chest in that statuette from Mesopotamia that is similar to the placement of the hand that she has upon her chest. All right? So a lot of similarities. You'll see during the Orientalizing period, a majority of the similarities will be coming from Mesopotamia. You're going to get tired of hearing that word over and over again in this lecture, but if it locks in and drills in that, then I'm doing my job. And then after this Orientalizing period, we're going to move into the Archaic period. All right? And in the Archaic period, we're going to see a majority of the influences coming from Egypt. So the standards and the canons are going to be predominantly coming from Egypt. So figure 5-7 is going to be the beginnings of that Egyptian influence. So in figure 5-7 is the Kouros. And the Kouros, as you can see, is we do have a little bit of that Mesopotamian influence with the braided hair in the back, but a majority of the body of the Kouros is going to be based off of the Egyptian canons. You have the leg that's coming forward. You have the simplicity of form that's very frontal and very profile. Hands are down to the side with thumbs pointing out. There's simple geometric shapes throughout the overall orientation of the body. There's also the archaic smile. All right. Now there's no hieroglyphics. There's no use of hierarchical scale. But there is that archaic smile in particular, and that's why we call this the archaic period. All right? The Egyptians didn't term the archaic smile. The Greeks did. All right? But they're deriving it from the Egyptians. And then the influences that are Mesopotamian is the hair and also the wide eyes. But the rest of the body and the rest of the form is very much Egyptian, except for the nudity. Again, the nudity and a little bit of the triangulation of upper body and voluminous lower body is going to be very Greek. And they're going to develop those concepts more and more. Now, with the leg moving forward, I want you to know that this has nothing to do with spiritualism with the Kouros sculpture, though it did with the Egyptians. So that leg moving forward was very much about moving into the afterworld. In this case, that leg moving forward is just a technical awareness on how to create that stance that they've learned from the Egyptians. In this case, it's a secular decision on how to show a body standing. But they're going to learn, and as you could learn yourself by standing up, you put one leg forward, straight out, keep it flat, and the other one and try to keep it flat on the ground. It's not going to work. You need like 3 extra inches on your back leg to stay like, keep your upper body like completely erect and up and down and vertical. Your body will lean forward in a position like that. So they're going to learn that, yes, this is a technical basic principle to learn from the Egyptians, but they're going to learn that that was a symbolic and spiritual decision the Egyptians used for the pharaohs, like we saw with the Menkori sculpture back in the Egyptian chapter. But they're going to realize, yeah, that ain't practical. We're going to make it more practical. So they're going to use that more humanistic, mathematical, rational, logical element of mind and make it more contemplative, and then have it actually look true to the orientation of a body standing. Okay? So do know that figure 5-7, the Kouros sculpture, is going to be your beginning to the Archaic period. And I'm so sorry I forgot, the Archaic period is going to run from 600 BCE to 480 BCE. I'm going to leave this video at this so that it's not as long as the Egyptian one, so you have a couple of Greek videos that you're going to have to look at for discussion and also in preparation for your quiz. All right, folks, I'll see you in the next video.